She's the exception and never the rule. She's a mystery that asks not to be solved, but simply to be experienced. Louisiana, where you can come as you are and leave different. Additional funding is provided by the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
This is the story of the Cajun people of Louisiana. It's a story that begins nearly 400 years ago, when French peasant farmers left Europe to carve a new homeland in the wilderness of Nova Scotia. After a brutal ethnic cleansing, the ancestors of the Cajun people were scattered around the world. They were able to end their exile and reunite their families here in Louisiana. People would have been brought down to this area, and this dry creek would have contained water, and they were loaded into the boats and brought down to the Minas Basin, where they would have been loaded on the transports and taken away from their homeland forever. European settlers came to this place over 400 years ago. It's amongst the most fertile and beautiful farmland in all of North America. Today it's called Nova Scotia. But to the original French settlers, this place was called l'Acadie. In 1604, 16 years before the Mayflower Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, French colonists came to Acadie and established one of the first permanent European communities in North America. Acadie's early years were precarious, but beginning in 1632, the first families began to arrive at the Port Royal settlement. Over the next 20 years, some 60 families came to make Acadie their home. These were the ancestors of nearly all the Acadian peoples of Canada and Louisiana today.
These people already knew each other. Somewhere around 60% or so of the people who became the Acadians came from the same neighborhood, from around a 20-mile radius around one little town in northern Poitou. They already knew each other. They already had a sense of identity, a sense of community, a sense of society. And essentially, this little society was uplifted and boated over to what we now call Nova Scotia, what they called l'Acadie, after the name that the Mi'kmaq Indians used to call the place.
The colony grew rapidly, spreading outward from Port Royal to Grand Pré, the Minas Basin, Beaubassin, and Chignecto. Small families expanded into large clans. These clans formed the base of Acadian society.
The family was so important for those people that there couldn't be a country, there couldn't be a people if there was not basically the groups of families that were all related to one another. So they kept on helping each other to survive. For instance, if one man named Cormier would die, then the Leblanc would take over the kids, but keep the name Cormier so that the descendant of that man would know where they came from.
From the early start of the 17th century, when Acadia appears on the map as a small French colony, the French inhabitants that later on would be known as Acadians really had no choice but to take care of their own affairs. France was far away. The major French settlement in the area was also far away in the St. Lawrence Valley, which is now Quebec.
The Acadians, or at least the colonists, French colonists who colonized the Bay of Fundy Basin, were refugees from the very bloody, very intense religious civil war that plagued France for almost a century, from the early to mid 1500s up until and culminating in 1628 with the fall of La Rochelle. Much of the warfare, much of the worst fighting took place in northwestern Poitou province. And the Acadians, who were peasants in that area, were caught in a military crossfire.
As generations passed, memories of the mother country began to fade. Isolated from France, the Acadians began to think of themselves as an independent people, evolving a culture and a way of life uniquely their own, developing a distinctly North American mentality.
The Acadians were the first group of European settlers in the New World to use a name for themselves that no longer had anything to do with the Old World. They were profoundly North American. They were what my colleague Mate Alain refers to as Homo Americanus, the first example, in fact, of that new species.